Maximize your influence. Kurt Mortensen is the author of Persuasion IQ, Laws of Charisma, and the best-selling book, Maximum Influence.
Welcome to Maximize Your Influence. This is Kurt Mortensen here, podcast 540. Good news, we have a special guest today, so get ready to take some notes and learn how to present with power. Today we have Michael Chad Hoeppner. He is a political communications expert. He's an adjunct professor at Columbia Business School. Michael has conducted a deep dive research on speaking habits of successful speakers. Hoeppner is the CEO and president of GK Training, a firm dedicated to giving individuals, companies, and organizations the communication skills necessary to reach their highest goals in work and life. He has worked with some of the world's most influential companies and leaders. Hoeppner is the author of Don't Say How to Communicate Effectively to Live a Better Life. Michael, welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the intro and appreciate being here. Thanks.
Oh, it's great to have you. You're talking about a skill that everyone should have learned 10, 20, 30 years ago. It's a type of thing that can really hold people back. And I'm glad we'll be talking about it. So let's start off with something fun. What is the biggest embarrassing moment or mistake that you have seen?
I will answer that question two ways. One, I will give you a very straightforward answer about a specific event, but then I want to turn the question on its head, and I'll get to that in a second. So this is not to pick on Michael Bay, the film director, and yet I'm going to pick on him for one reason. It's a very Googleable event. It's kind of well known, and I think at this point in his career, he's probably moved on far beyond it, but it's a useful one to reference for the following reason. Michael Bay has this meltdown when he's trying to give a presentation, and you can just Google, Michael Bay public speaking meltdown or something like that. But the real challenge is that, as you see, he doesn't just get thrown off. He actually throws other people around him under the bus. He complains about the teleprompter and he walks off the stage in a bit of a fit. So the cardinal sin here is that he gave up and he blamed other people for it as well. So that act of giving up, just fleeing, stomping off the stage, actually made it much, much worse than if he'd actually just forgotten something or had to navigate the technical difficulties of the teleprompter. So that's an example of an egg on the face kind of moment. But I want to answer the question entirely differently, which is this. I'm actually more interested in all the phantom concerns that live out there right now and all the listeners and all their heads, because the concern about that nightmare scenario very often is a bigger problem than the actual nightmare scenario. And what I mean by that is people live in such concern or such fear about what if something goes wrong that it actually influences all of their speaking. And those moments of things really going disastrously wrong, first of all, they very rarely even happen. But second of all, if you actually stay focused on the people who matter, i.e. the audience, and you deal with those disasters with simple transparency, acknowledging what's happening and then moving on, those seeming disasters can actually be not just handled with grace, but even potentially turned to your benefit.
Oh, I agree 100%, Michael. That's so important because we get so concerned. What if I make a mistake? And we have all these nightmares that you talked about. Something goes wrong, and the answer is, it will, pretty much every time.
Yeah, it's not an if.
I love how you say you turn to your benefit. Your audience seems to like you more, that you're real. You've made a mistake. You dealt with it. You didn't go off like Michael Bay did. And that's so important to understand. You're not going to give a perfect presentation. I mean, I can remember times people have tripped over my laptop and broke it. The internet goes out. Something happens. Something goes wrong. There's that heckler in the audience. So what do you do when you're put all your energy into this presentation and something goes wrong, right? It's not fair, but we don't deal with fair. We deal with reality here. Something goes wrong, which will happen. What is the best way to handle it?
To your point, things are a when, not an if. They're going to go wrong. And there's a chapter in the book actually on this very thing, which is called Navigating Mistakes. The first thing to remind yourself of when we're in other focused communication situations, and by that I mean we're actually thinking about the other person rather than ourselves relentlessly, we don't even notice these things as mistakes. Now, if you take that and you think about a presentation in which you're much more focused on yourself, the reminder here is that the important People are the audience, not you. So in the chapter on navigating mistakes, I teach 3 very simple F's. If you're listening to this and I ask you the question, what are the 3 F's of the human threat response? You're probably thinking in your head, fight, flight, or freeze. And in fact, that's what Michael Bay did. One of those, he went into flight. He left the stage. But I would gently suggest that instead you take the lesson of the chapter, which is to replace those 3 F's with 3 very different F's, which are fake it, feature it, or fix it. So fake it means, look, if no one notices, keep going. You don't have to always call attention in life every single time you make a mistake to the mistake. But if it's threatening to throw you off, you have 2 really good options. You can feature it or you can fix it. So fix it means you just acknowledge it, name it, and then keep proceeding. But feature it means you actually spin it as a positive thing. And when you see people make a joke or create some degree of rapport when these things go wrong, that's what they're doing. They're actually featuring it. And in the chapter, I even have people cut out a page out of the book. And the page has these various transparency phrases written on it, like, let me go back for a moment, or that's not quite right. What I meant was, or, oh, I can't believe I forgot. I also want to say, and they practice using these phrases to reset.
Love it. And you're so right. When you have that rapport and your audience centered, it makes such a big difference, because I love it, because you can fake it, you can feature it, you can fix it. Let me add an F to that. When you can do that, they're more forgiving, right?
Yeah.
Their ability to forgive you, that you're a real person, that it's not that big of a deal. If you make it a big deal, they'll make it a big deal. You're right on that.
Let me interject for that a second, because you just said something super profound, but you took the conversation to a deep place, which is that forgive is not just that the audience will forgive you. You're actually cultivating a tiny sense of self-forgiveness, actually. You are going to make mistakes, and forgiving yourself and moving on from the mistake by literally just acknowledging it, but proceeding, can actually make presenting a much less fraught and a much less perfectionistic kind of place, and a much more forgiving one.
That's so true. You're going to make a mistake. Roll with it. Have fun with it. Your audience will forgive you if you forgive yourself. That self-forgiveness you brought up is so important, because there is no perfect presentation. You're going to make a mistake. You're going to fall off the platform, which I've done, or leave the lavalier on in the bathroom. I mean, we do these things and it happens, and we just roll with it. So that's good information. So let's shift gears a little bit here. We have the 2 concepts here. We have the content, which I think people probably spend too much time on, versus delivery. What matters most? Spending time on content, delivery, a little bit of both? What's more important? What say you?
Yeah. I'm going to actually let the listeners experience this for themselves right now. And you can answer, listener, you can answer the question, because you get to respond to 2 things. First time, bad delivery, good content. Second time, bad content, good delivery. Here we go. The first example of what I'm going to share is saying something smart, but with poor delivery. And the smart thing I'll say is that kinesthetic learning is the best way to unlock positive communication, because kinesthetic learning teaches your body how to do different, not just your brain. That was number 1. Here's number 2. Okay. This is good delivery, bad content. Blah, 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 blah. Blah 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 blah. Okay, hopefully you've not stopped listening to the podcast right now, because the ideal, of course, is not that you have bad this, bad that, but both content and delivery improve, because you unlock a virtuous cycle in which each one makes the other one better. Now, every study ever done of these 2 things points out that delivery matters more. What I'm typically helping clients do is make both better, but make both better through an unconventional approach, which is by starting with delivery. So if you read Don't Say what you'll see is the entire book is focused on delivery, not content. Delivery, how you say stuff. And it's not just because it matters so much, which it does. If you unlock more powerful delivery tools, what will happen is you actually begin to build a virtuous cycle in which you even think of smarter stuff to say. So you actually come up with better content, and then you also have the delivery skills to support that smart content and do all the things that your podcast is about: exuding charisma, connecting with an audience, persuading an audience, those sorts of things.
I agree. It seems like every student, every corporate executive knows this logically, but they spend what, 90% of their time on their PowerPoint slides, their content, what they should say, and they go through it in their mind, they deliver it, and they're like, well, that didn't sound very good. So, do we have a percent? Should it be 50% creation, 50% practice and delivery? What do you think is the perfect mix? Because we all know we spend way too much time on the content and the PowerPoint slides and the delivery is the most important. And that just is like a side note. What do you think? Is there a percent there?
Yeah, I will give folks this tool that you should institute today to make your life as a presenter easier, faster, and come up with much better final product. And the technique is called out loud drafting. It's exactly what it sounds like. You prepare by saying stuff out loud to start. Now, this puts the whole order of the process entirely on its head because most people do exactly as you talked about, Kurt. They sit down and they obsessively prepare away. They type 1,000 words. They make a deck that is just littered with text and difficult to look at. And they obsess about every single word that is going to come out of their mouths. But that is a trap. And here's why. You're not going to be handing people a packet of papers. You're not going to be giving them a deck. You're going to be taking air into your body, turning the air into sound, and then shaping the sound into words. It's a physical delivery you'll be doing. So it doesn't make any sense that you're going to start that whole process by writing. So instead, try out loud drafting. Here's how it works. Don't stay seated, stand up, move around the room, and if you want to, even grab your smart device and record into some sort of transcription software. So if you say brilliant things, you have them captured, but stand up, move around, and give yourself some open-ended prompts to answer. So I'll give you a couple. What is the one thing I want my audience to take away from this presentation? What is one powerful story that can hammer home a key insight? What is a call to action I want my audience to take at the end of this? Actually say those questions out loud and then start talking. Now, the first time you start talking, it's going to be dumb. That's okay. This is the first time you've ever said these things out loud. Erase, delete the file, whatever it is, do it again. Then do it a third time. That whole process will have taken 5-10 minutes at tops, and you will have done some super powerful things. One, you will have started the process of thinking about your topic. You will have started that process off with freedom and ease and relaxation, as opposed to a focus on perfection. Two, you will have thought of some of these ideas, but in the vernacular that we use for speaking rather than writing, because we choose words very differently speaking than we do when we're writing. And then number three, you will already be a little bit down the pathway of becoming quote unquote memorized because you'll build some muscle memory about your ideas. Now, once you've done that first layer of out loud drafting, then you can write some stuff down. But when you write it down, don't write down an entire textbook of material, bullets, 6 to 10 words per bullet, and write down the outline of what you want to cover. At that point, now that you have that outline, stand back up and practice. Do as theater actors call a stumble through and just get through it. If you do that process, you're going to get better content faster and be farther along of actually understanding what you're talking about. I tend to see with my clients who do this, it makes their prep faster and they come up with better stuff much, much earlier. And it even removes some of the dread about presenting.
Maximize, hopefully you caught that. It's the outline, it's the practice, it's the bullets. You don't want to have a script because it sounds like you have a script. That's so important. And Michael, you brought up something about stories. Now, as a presenter and as a coach, how important is stories to engage and capture your audience?
That will be my second book. Reason I say that is because, as I previewed, this entire book is all about delivery because it is the single thing that people neglect the most, and it has such incredible power to transform how you come across. That said, second book, which will focus on content. I'm sort of committing myself to it. I don't know what my second book will be on yet, but if I write a second book on this similar subject, content might be it. If you're going to think about content, the beginning and end of that is in fact story. Humans learn material in story. They memorize ideas in story. Makes you relatable. It drives home lessons without having to, beat people over the head. Stories are incredibly powerful. And in fact, I often suggested people develop their go-to stories that they can use in different situations because stories are versatile. And in fact, if I'm coaching a politician, very frequently what we're looking for are these stories that they can use to answer a whole myriad of questions. Because look, you're going to be answering a lot of questions, different situations in which you have to talk. If you have a few really powerhouse stories, it can go a long way to answering all those questions and handling all those situations with real skill and real humanity.
So important. I love that. The go-to story. Everyone should be creating a story list. And remember, studies show stories persuade without detection. They're below the radar. It's how we learn. It's how we remember things. It's a critical thing for all of us to master. But let me ask, I mean, the title of your book is Don't Say which everyone is saying too much. How can we eliminate that when we speak? Most people, it's not even on their radar that they said it 27 times that first minute. How do we get rid of that dreadful whatever it is? Please tell us.
Yeah, well, it's not by following the advice of the title of my book. The title is a bit of a trick because the reason I titled it that is that I want everyone to read it because I want them to actually learn how to avoid saying. But the instruction they're very likely telling themselves in their head is that same thing. Don't say. As you hear that instruction, of course, all your brain is doing is trafficking in thought suppression. And humans are terrible at thought suppression. If I tell you don't think about A, all you're doing is preparing yourself to think and obsess about that thing so you can compare it to everything else in the known universe. So the title is a bit of a trick to get people to pick up the book. And as soon as they do, in the preface right away, I tell them that never again are we going to do that simple thought suppression sort of advice. Don't say don't be nervous, don't be salesy, don't move your hands too much. All those sorts of very generic bits of don't advice we give. Then we get into the subject of linguistic precision. So what that means is the way to avoid the ums, the way to reduce the ums is not by trying to make them more notable, more forbidden, but actually focus on all the other important and useful words that are hidden by those ums. So I have readers do an exercise called finger walking, and it sounds kind of like the title of the exercise. They walk their fingers across the desk, second and third finger, taking small steps forward, almost like your hand were a little person walking forward across your desk. And each finger step, you're choosing words. If you feel yourself saying or an or a like or a kinda or a sorta, the task is you have to stop your hands for a moment, recalibrate, figure out what it is you're trying to say, and then proceed, walking your fingers across the table or desk, choosing each and every single word that comes out of your mouth. Now, choosing, that's the essential thing there, Kurt, because you said something. You said most people don't even know that they have 27 ums in the first minute. You're right. The two tests of filler words are, is it grammatically necessary? And with an it's obviously not. And two, are you even aware you're doing it? So lots of folks out there may not say chronically, but they might say some other word like kind of, sort of, or even ridiculous ones like literally or viscerally. Now, one time coached someone who said viscerally over and over again. He wasn't even aware that he was saying it. So these are the two criteria I encourage you to think about. What are those useless words that litter my language, and how can I be more precise in everything that I say?
So what do you think the number one speaking mistake people make is, and how can we get rid of it?
Yeah, I think the number one speaking mistake is that people simply do not pause to consider what they want to say next. And that initial sin creates a whole bunch of other challenges. Well, they never pause, so they don't breathe. And when they don't breathe, they lose all vocal variety. Their voice sounds monotonous. And when their voice sounds monotonous, part of monotonous means you speak at one speed, which, if you don't have breath, is too fast. When you speak too quickly, it's hard to understand you. You're also more likely to stumble over your words. So your enunciation goes down the tubes. And then when the enunciation goes down the tubes, you start to say more ums and uhs anyway, because you're not opening your mouth widely enough to actually enunciate the ideas you're sharing. So how do you change all that? Well, it's not just enough to be mindful of it and tell yourself to pause or breathe, because that would be a mental instruction for what is ultimately a physical activity. Speaking is physical. It takes over 100 muscles to do the thing that we're doing right now. It's a physical activity. So thinking that you're going to give yourself a mental instruction to do something different physically is like thinking you're going to tell yourself something about your golf swing on Wednesday and then assume it will be different on Sunday when you go play. So how do you actually learn to pause so you can be more intentional about what's coming out of your mouth? I do it with Lego blocks because they're very satisfying to use and they kind of click in place, but you can really use any object you want. And the exercise is to practice speaking one idea at a time, not 3, not 15, not 25, one. And at the end of the idea, they place down that piece of paper and they pick up the second piece of paper and they say the second idea. And at the end of the second idea, they place down the piece of paper in silence. They wait till they want to figure out what they want to say next. They pick up the third piece and continue, and so on and so forth. And what you're doing is helping folks actually be in the moment of thinking and speaking, as opposed to in the past, obsessing about all the mistakes they've made, or in the future, in anxiety, thinking about all the ones they're about to make, but rather in the moment of sharing one idea at a time. So if I had to direct people to one place to try to begin to shift their communication in an even more positive direction, that would be the place.
There we have it. Learn to pause, take a breath, learn to think. Pauses gives your audience time to think about it. They're more engaging, they listen better. So that is well said. So, Michael, where can our listeners find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, easiest place is just don'tsayum.com. Just like it sounds, DONTSAYUM, don'tsayum.com. And you can also visit me at my firm's website, which is gktraining.com. That's gktraining.com.
Thanks, Michael, for sharing such powerful information. Anybody can present, but can you be persuasive? Anybody can inform, but can you be influential? This is a skill you have to master, whether you like it or not. Find one thing you learned today, apply it, change your life, change your income, change your future, get more promotions, close more sales, be more influential, be a better negotiator, whatever it is. This is a skill. So thank you for listening to Maximize Your Influence. You can find us at iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeart, and YouTube, or go to maximizeyourinfluence.com. That's also the place for your free Persuasion IQ assessment. Thanks for listening. Tell your family, friends, and enemies about the podcast. Learn it, master it, do it, become more influential, have better presence, become a better presenter, and go out and persuade with power.